That was Prime Minister Netanyahu there at the General Assembly of the Jewish Federations of North America, speaking there with the chairman. And with me in studio now, Josh Block, CEO and president of the Israel Project, and Marc Schulman, editor-in-chief of History Central and Newsweek columnist. Thank you, gentlemen. So, Marc, would you say that the Prime Minister was right in saying, well, relations have never been better? And yet everything we hear around this, even around this conference, is that the relationship has suffered, and that's why events like this are very much needed.
Okay, I think we need to separate out between what he said, relations have never been better between the United States and Israel, and relations between the Jewish community and Israel, I think, are two different matters. I think there's no question in the fact that Netanyahu's administration is so identified with President Trump is certainly hurting the relationship, certainly amongst a large number of American Jews who clearly are Democrats and are very much anti-Trump. And so that creates a certain level of difficulty. Look, part of the problem is this particular Israeli government does not have anyone from the center or left in it at all. So there's no one but Netanyahu is the most moderate person in the current coalition. And of course, he speaks the best by far of anyone in the coalition. So there's that issue as well, that most of American Jewry is somewhere center to left of where Prime Minister Netanyahu is. And so identifying with the Israeli government sometimes is a bit challenging. So I would say when looking at it, there's no question that the relationship between the Israeli government and the American government has never been closer. The relationship between American Jewry and Israel, while I wouldn't say is in a crisis, has some serious difficulties. And the question is where it's going to go further.
Serious difficulties because maybe of another point that the Prime Minister mentioned, and that's the tension, you could call it, between secular Jews and religious Jews in Israel, the separation of religion and state that he touched on. This is something that often comes up as a bone of contention between the communities.
You know, one of the beautiful things about Israel is that Americans, not just in the Jewish community, but Americans see Israel as like America. And as Americans who want to engender support for Israel, we encourage that. It's a terrific thing. And the countries share so much. At the same time, we are different. And Israel is a country that is the nation state of the Jewish people. And its tradition of celebrating the Jewish people and having Judaism play a role in state and public life is a reality. And how that's navigated is different than it is in the United States. And so for Americans, sometimes those contradictions are difficult to understand and to navigate. On the other hand, Israel does have an obligation to solve some of these questions, to address the issues that exist inside the Jewish family in a way that is part of a family. We are Am Echad. And I think, as you heard from every speaker at the conference this week, including the Prime Minister, Tzipi Livni, from President Rivlin, from the Speaker of the Knesset, everyone who spoke about the need for unity and dialogue. And I think there are solutions to these problems. But at the same time, they have to be done in the context of cooperation, conversation, openness, and tolerance. And that tolerance has to exist on both sides.
I'm not nearly as optimistic because I do believe that as long as the current political situation exists in Israel where the ultra-Orthodox end up with the veto, it's very hard to make the sort of progress that is necessary. I mean, Americans don't understand the political system. What they don't understand is the fact that the system gives the ultra-Orthodox the veto in any sort of direction. And anyone who has been living in this country these last years have watched slowly but surely they've expanded their political power. Maybe not their economic power, but the political power has expanded. And the country has been moving religiously, slowly but surely to the right in terms of laws, in terms of whether it's the laws about trying to make the Shabbat with the small markets closing and the ability to keep the railroad open, at least to work on the construction on the railroad. There's that general sense of it moving towards more religious, which goes against the American values, and it certainly goes against any chance of the conservative reform movement being recognized. But even the Orthodox movement, what came out in the last year that only certain Orthodox rabbis are being recognized, and they can have a list of Orthodox rabbis that are okay. I mean, this shows a real problem, and there's no easy solution in this country, because as long as the system is what it is and the ultra-Orthodox have a veto, as long as they're part of the government, it becomes almost impossible to change that.
Mark, I want to go back to your point on values, the values in Israel and how some members of the Jewish community abroad might not agree, but also the values in the United States and President Trump taking office and values that some see as controversial now being part of the White House. How has the Trump administration, the Trump presidency, affected the relations between the Jewish communities in the U.S. and Israel?
I think on multiple levels. I mean, quite frankly, I was involved in a movement to try to bring some more American values to Israel before the last election. As the last election got very problematic, we actually dropped the idea. We realized it wasn't going to work very well. We didn't want to bring an American election that looked the way it did to Israel. So we actually closed what we were doing because it didn't make any sense. Look, there are various aspects to this. The Me Too movement has certainly come to Israel in a very big way. We've seen it very recently in a number of high-publicized cases. Israel's different, but it's the same ultimately, and that certainly had an effect. I mean, President Trump indirectly has had a major impact on those whole issues. I think there is no question that President Trump's impact on politics here has been very strong. I think that clearly the Likud has celebrated the fact that the close relationship that Prime Minister Netanyahu has with President Trump, there's no question that that's a major electoral plus for the Likud. Look, there's no place on earth where President Trump is looked upon as positively as in Israel. I mean, the United States has an 85% positive rating in the latest Pew poll, the highest in any place in the world except the Philippines. And that's after President Trump has been in office for 2 years. So there's no question that's had a major impact. I think it's, of course, not in step with the views of the American Jewish community, where the American Jewish community, I think, is 25% approval rating or something like that for President Trump, and in Israel it's 85%. So that creates a sort of disconnect, even on a personal level, when you have a discussion with people. You know, when I say something to somebody about, you know, this and that President Trump may have done, and they look at me, but he's great for Israel. And that's true. On that level, at least on the short-term level, he's certainly great for Israel.
You know, I think the politics in the United States are very complicated these days. There's a lot of passion. People feel very, very deeply about mostly domestic issues. And when it comes to foreign policy, sometimes it's difficult to separate the feelings that we have or disagreements about policy from the feeling we have about the presidency. I think all of us have our hearts rended when we see children separated from parents and things that, you know, are not good. On the other hand, you know, this administration's foreign policy has been quite strong. And, you know, I think Dan Shapiro, who's the Obama ambassador to Israel, has been very clear in making his views about Trump's foreign policy relative to the Middle East and other places known. You know, Jerusalem is the capital of Israel. The embassy belongs in Jerusalem. UNRWA and its definition of refugees is perpetuating the problem and preventing peace. So when they're confronting these things, I think when they're addressing these policy issues, they do find support. And I think one of the things that it's important for Jews to do and others in the United States to do is to try to separate our partisan feelings from questions of what policy are. And those of us who are in the business of supporting the U.S.-Israel relationship need to help both secure the positive, meaningful gains that this administration is advancing for Israel, for the United States, while ensuring that there's not a precipitous drop-off among those on the left who can't make that separation between policy and identity or ideology or associating them with someone who they feel so strongly about.
We were discussing before the one-on-one with Netanyahu began about his charisma as a prime minister and as a speaker. And in fact, we saw that in that Q&A. And one of the things he said, and Josh, you mentioned it, that some Americans view Israel as an extension of America. Is it possible that they see Netanyahu as an extension of an American as well?
Oh, absolutely. He could win for president without a shadow of a doubt. He'd be the most popular Republican in the United States. I think some polls have actually shown that. Look, he's a great speaker. He has great charisma. He's a really smart person. I don't agree with a lot of his ideology, and I don't agree with his belief that he should be prime minister for so long. I mean, one of the problems that every leader has is every leader thinks he can't be replaced, and we have that throughout history, and that's when things get problematic. But he's really very good. I mean, he was very good. Look, he was a great ambassador to the United Nations. There's no question he was an excellent, and that's where he got his start. His rhetoric is excellent. And look, one-on-one, he's very, very personable. There's no question that he would make a great American political figure. I mean, I think I've heard Sarah make some comments about the fact that she wishes he could have been an American president, practically. And he could have succeeded very well in the United States. And I think that's part of the reason people identify with him. I mean, I've had discussions with people on the right in the United States, and they just can't believe what a great person. When I say something about corruption or anything else, it can't be. He's wonderful. And he's certainly more popular in the United States than he is in Israel, because even his supporters here in Israel still have some questions. In America, Bibi walks on water. I guess that's good for Israel, at least in the short term.
You know, every prime minister of Israel has the benefit of being the prime minister of Israel. And Americans love Israel. And, you know, that's a positive combination.
That's a positive combination and a positive note to end this rather long broadcast on. Thank you very much, Josh Block and Marc Schulman, for joining me for this. And thank you for being with us. That's it for this bulletin. Stay tuned. There's more coming up on i24News.